Welcome back to Free Media. I'm Amber Duke.
And I'm Robby Soave. Stephen Miller got into a testy argument with CNN's Pamela Brown about whether judges are right to block Trump's agenda. Let's watch.
Whenever a judge rules against this administration, you say they're going rogue. Do you think a judge should just rubber stamp what your White House does? If not, what checks and balances do you think should be in place for this White House?
It is not the job of a district court judge to perform an individual green light or red light on every single policy that the president takes as the head of the executive branch. Just think about the premise baked into your question, respectfully, Pam. You're saying that when the American people elect a president of the United States of America,
I'm not saying
well, it's the implication, who is the sole head of the executive branch. Well, let me finish. I will answer the question happily. But look, when you have these kinds of lazy assumptions built into questions, it makes it hard to have a constructive dialogue.
What is a lazy assumption? I said you all had to win.
You said is it my expectation?
I'm speaking
you
because now you're putting...
You said, is it my expectation? It's not just you. It's the whole media. In other words, when you
hear a sentence
like...
I know you want to loop us on. It is a completely fair question. You say judges who rule against the White House go rogue.
And I will gladly answer it. When you say, do we think district court judges should rubber stamp each action? There is a premise that is built into that is absurd.
Well, that was fun.
I don't think either of them came off very well there. I mean, I don't really like Stephen Miller. I find him creepy. I don't like his vibes at all. But it was a kind of an unfair question. I mean, it was a leading question for sure. Although he and other people in the administration have, increasingly taken the position that yes, they're very mad at the judiciary when they issue rulings that are contrary to what the administration is doing. Although, as I say over and over again, I'm not super sympathetic to them on that because you could accomplish with legislation what they just refused to do. Now, some of these issues are more under the president's authority than others. From my point of view, his economic stuff related to tariffs, tariffs are a form of tax and clearly corresponds to a power that Congress is supposed to have. You could maybe construct a more coherent argument that some of the stuff he wants to do on national security or immigration more directly relates to presidential authorities. But no one thinks, right, the president should or the judiciary's role is to rubber stamp things. It's like an actual debate over what the law is. The judges should strike down things that are unconstitutional and uphold things that are not constitutional, and we have a fundamental disagreement over what those things are.
Yeah, and I think the other part of it too is the administration feels like some federal judges are basically overstepping their authority in making rulings on things over which they don't necessarily have jurisdiction. So I'm really interested to see what comes out of the Supreme Court review of nationwide injunctions, because that's been, of course, a thorn in the side for the Trump administration. They say that a nationwide injunction should be more limited in scope, that typically when a plaintiff brings a complaint against some kind of federal or executive policy, that the remedy for that should be just to provide relief for the plaintiffs rather than doing a nationwide injunction that preemptively applies to everybody. And then the argument for the nationwide injunction is, well, it would be quite time-consuming and expensive for everyone who's affected by a nationwide policy to bring suit and have to get relief that way. So I think the Supreme Court will probably try to find a middle ground between those two issues. Yeah, they're going to win some of them and lose some of them.
And if the shoe was on the other foot, it would just be, the commentary would be exactly switched, right? If we had judges thwarting, I would be applauding if the judges, frankly, were thwarting aspects of an Obama or Biden policy agenda that I think is bad. I wouldn't be saying, oh no, judges shouldn't get in the way of the president. I want the judges to get in the way of this executive, any executive, when they're doing policies I don't want, and I want them not in the way when they're not doing that. It's like a case-by-case basis. It's not a philosophical view as much on what's the role of the judiciary. I think the judiciary should apply vigorous oversight to what the executive is doing, particularly now that we're in a situation where Congress is really not going to do that. Then you're in a situation where you have the judiciary as a quasi-legislative making role, or rather the executive being a legislative role, and the judiciary having perhaps more than intended oversight over that, because you just have no real congressional oversight.
I think that, again, it's really important for the Supreme Court to I think, put his finger on the scale a little bit in terms of these nationwide injunctions, because there's basically two scenarios that are possible here. One is that there are a historic number of nationwide injunctions because Trump is just behaving so lawlessly. He's acting like an authoritarian and abusing his power vigorously. Maybe that's the case. Like, maybe I'm wrong, and Trump actually is just flouting the law with every time he signs a piece of paper with his pen. Or maybe there are some cases, probably a lot of cases, where the judges are overstepping their authority and being too trigger happy on the nationwide injunction, and the Supreme Court needs to rein them in.
Yeah, the final word is going to be had by the Supreme Court, and so far the Supreme Court seems open to reasonable arguments one way and the other. They've handed the Trump administration some wins, and they've also said, no, this makes us uncomfortable, you can't do this, or you got to defer to the lower court for now until we have our time to consider it. So I frankly think they're charting the situation pretty well in order to, stop like an all-out civil war between liberals and conservatives over what the national policy is going to be. Again, differences that are designed to be hammered out by the people we actually directly elect every 2 years or every 6 years.
It is like especially crazy right now, though. I mean, remember last week we taped a segment about the tariffs being struck down by a federal judge, and then literally 2 hours later an appeals court was like, no, they're fine.
We are not meant
We're getting
to live
whiplash.
like this. Our blood pressure, our poor tariff reporter at Reason Magazine, Eric Boehm, his poor blood pressure. I feel for him. Thanks for watching Free Media. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our show, and we'll have more for you right after this.